I laid in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling as Marcia's venomous words echoed through my mind. Abby, you're a useless, draining weight on this family. Max deserves better than a wife who wallows in bed all day. Her cruel remark cut deep, reopening wounds that never seemed to heal. I closed my eyes, trying to escape the harsh reality that had become my life, but the memories came flooding back, unbidden. It all started with that fateful day, the day my life changed forever. I had been working late at the art studio, lost in the creative flow that had once brought me such joy. As I left the building, the wheelchair ramp malfunctioned, sending me tumbling violently to the ground. The searing pain that followed would forever be seared into my memory. The doctors delivered the devastating news. I was paralyzed from the waist down, my dreams of being a successful artist crushed in an instant. Max had been supportive at first, but over time, the strain of caring for me took its toll on our marriage. His family never made any effort to hide their disdain towards me. Marcia, with her perpetual scowl and cutting remarks, made it clear that she saw me as nothing more than a burden. Hank, her husband, simply followed her lead, his silence just as damaging as her words. Even Jenna, Max's sister, couldn't resist taking jabs at me whenever the opportunity arose. Why bother getting up? Not like you can do anything useful from bed anyway, she would taunt, flipping through my sketches with a dismissive sneer. I tried to channel my pain into my artwork, pouring my emotions onto the canvas, but it was never enough. The constant barrage of negativity and resentment wore me down, day by day. Then the final blow came from the one person I thought would always stand by me. Max sat on the edge of our bed, his expression somber as he delivered the words that shattered my heart into a million pieces. I need someone who can support me, Abby. This isn't the life I wanted, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. In that moment, I knew that I had to leave. I couldn't stay in this toxic environment any longer, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a burden. It was time to take control of my life, to find the strength within myself that had been buried beneath years of emotional turmoil. As I packed my belongings, Carla, my kind and supportive housekeeper, offered a gentle smile. You're doing the right thing, Abby. It's time to start living for yourself. With a newfound determination, I left the house that had become a prison, embarking on a journey that would lead me to a life I never could have imagined. The devastating accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down replayed in my mind like a broken record. It was a sunny morning, and I was running late for work at the art studio. In my haste, I didn't notice the loose bolt on the wheelchair ramp until it was too late. As I descended, the ramp suddenly gave way, sending me tumbling violently to the ground. The searing pain that shot through my back was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I lay there, helpless and alone, praying for someone to find me. Hours seemed to pass before a coworker finally discovered me and called for an ambulance. The ride to the hospital was a blur, but the doctor's words were crystal clear. I'm sorry, Miss Miller, but the impact has caused severe damage to your spinal cord. You'll never walk again. Those words shattered my world. My dreams, my independence, my future, all gone in an instant. Max was by my side, his face etched with concern, but even then, I could sense the strain it was putting on our relationship. In the months that followed, I tried my best to adjust to my new reality. Max hired Carla, a kind and firm housekeeper, to help me with daily tasks. She was a godsend, always offering a gentle touch and a listening ear. You're stronger than you think, Abby, she would say, her warm smile a beacon of hope in my darkest moments. But as time passed, the cracks in our once happy marriage began to show. Max's family, who had never been particularly fond of me, grew increasingly resentful. Marcia, my mother-in-law, made no effort to hide her disdain. Look at her, just lying there like a useless lump, she would snarl, her words cutting deeper than any knife. Hank, her husband, would simply nod in agreement, his silence just as damaging as her venom. Even Jenna, Max's sister, couldn't resist taking jabs at me. Why bother trying to draw? It's not like anyone would want to buy art from a cripple, she would sneer, tossing my sketchbook aside with a cruel laugh. Through it all, Carla remained my rock, my unwavering source of strength. Don't let them break you, Abby, she would whisper, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. But as the resentment and bitterness grew, I found it harder and harder to hold on to hope. Max grew distant, consumed by his work and the pressure from his family. Our once loving relationship had become a mere shell, a constant reminder of all that I had lost. It was during one of our rare conversations that Max finally revealed the truth. "I can't do this anymore, Abby. I need a wife who can support me, not someone I have to take care of." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, but deep down, I knew he was right. Our marriage had become a prison, a constant struggle against the weight of his family's cruelty and my own limitations. As I watched him walk out the door, a newfound determination took root within me. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control how I responded. It was time to take back my life, to rise from the ashes of my shattered dreams and show the world, and Max's family, that I was more than just a burden. With Carla by my side, I began to plan my escape, my path to freedom and redemption. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope, a hope that would soon burn brighter than any flame. After Max's departure, the hostility from his family escalated to new heights. Marcia, my bitter mother-in-law, seemed to take perverse pleasure in tormenting me at every opportunity. "What's the point in Max having a wife who can't even cook dinner?" she would snarl, her eyes filled with contempt as she glared at me from across the room. Hank, her husband, would simply sit in silence, his lack of defense cutting just as deep as Marcia's cruel words. Even Jenna, Max's sister, who had recently moved back in after her own marriage fell apart, couldn't resist piling on the abuse. "You're just a burden, Abby," she would sneer, tossing my sketchbook aside with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Why bother trying to draw when you'll never amount to anything?" Through it all, Carla remained my rock, her unwavering support and encouragement the only thing keeping me from slipping into despair. "Don't let them break you, Abby," she would whisper, her warm embrace a lifeline in the midst of the storm. "You're stronger than they'll ever be." And so I clung to my art, pouring my pain and frustration onto the canvas, creating vibrant worlds that offered a temporary escape from the harsh reality that surrounded me. But no matter how hard I tried, the constant barrage of negativity and resentment took its toll. I found it harder and harder to summon the creative spark that had once burned so brightly within me. One day, as I struggled to capture the image in my mind, Jenna sauntered into the room, her eyes narrowed with disdain. "What's the point of all this?" she sneered, gesturing dismissively at my work. "No one's ever going to buy art from a cripple." Her words cut like a knife, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. I hurled my paintbrush across the room, the splatters of color a vivid representation of the rage that coursed through my veins. "Get out," I growled, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Get out and don't come back until you've learned some basic human decency." Jenna's eyes widened in shock, but before she could respond, Carla appeared in the doorway, her expression one of steely determination. "You heard her," Carla said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "It's time for you to leave." Jenna opened her mouth to protest, but one look from Carla was enough to silence her. With a huff of indignation, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Carla turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and pride. "You did the right thing, Abby. You don't deserve to be treated like that." I nodded, my hands still shaking from the confrontation. "I can't live like this anymore, Carla. I need to get out of here, away from all of this toxicity." Carla's expression softened, and she reached out to squeeze my hand reassuringly. "Then we'll find a way," she said, her voice filled with determination. "You deserve to be happy, Abby, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you achieve that." As she spoke those words, I felt a glimmer of hope ignite within me, a hope that, for the first time in years, burned brighter than the darkness that had consumed me. It was time to take control of my life, to break free from the shackles of Max's family and their cruelty. And with Carla by my side, I knew that nothing was impossible. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any worse, Jenna's return to the family home added fuel to the already raging fire of hostility. Fresh from her own failed marriage, she seemed determined to take out her bitterness and frustration on me. Well, if it isn't the useless cripple," she would sneer, her words dripping with venom as she sauntered into the room. "Still moping around, I see." I tried to ignore her taunts, focusing instead on my artwork, the one thing that still brought me solace in the midst of the storm. But Jenna was relentless, her cruelty knowing no bounds. "What's the point of all this?" she would mock, flipping through my sketchbook with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "No one's ever going to buy art from a pathetic waste of space like you." Carla, bless her soul, was always there to intervene, her fierce loyalty and unwavering support a constant source of strength. "That's enough, Jenna," she would say, her voice firm but laced with compassion. "Abby doesn't deserve to be treated like that." But Jenna was like a rabid dog, snapping and snarling at anyone who dared to challenge her. "Stay out of this, Carla," she would snarl. "This is family business." And then her gaze would turn back to me, her eyes filled with a twisted mixture of pity and disdain. "Why bother getting up, Abby? Not like you can do anything useful from bed anyway." Those words cut deeper than any knife, reigniting the pain and despair that had become my constant companions. In those moments, it was all I could do to hold back the tears, to maintain the fragile facade of strength that had become my only defense. But Carla saw through it all, her keen eyes picking up on the subtle cracks in my armor. "Don't listen to her, Abby," she would whisper, her warm embrace a lifeline in the midst of the storm. "You're stronger than they'll ever be." And so I clung to those words, using them as a shield against the constant barrage of cruelty and disdain. I poured my pain and frustration onto the canvas, creating vibrant worlds that offered a temporary escape from the harsh reality that surrounded me. But no matter how hard I tried, the weight of their words was suffocating, threatening to snuff out the last flickering embers of hope that burned within me. One day, as I sat in my room, trying to capture the image in my mind, Jenna barged in, her eyes narrowed with disdain. "Still at it, I see," she sneered, her gaze sweeping over my work with a contemptuous sneer. "You really are pathetic, you know that?" Something inside me snapped, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled out. "At least I'm not a bitter, miserable failure like you," I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. Jenna's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. But then a cruel smile twisted her lips, and she let out a harsh laugh. "You're right, Abby," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "At least I'm not a useless cripple who's nothing but a burden on everyone around her." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving me to drown in the aftermath of her cruel words. As the tears streamed down my cheeks, Carla appeared in the doorway, her expression one of concern and sympathy. "Don't listen to her, Abby," she said, her voice gentle but laced with steel. "You're worth 1,000 of her." I nodded, too choked up to speak, and allowed Carla to pull me into a comforting embrace. In that moment, I knew that something had to change, that I couldn't go on living like this, surrounded by such cruelty and toxicity. It was time to take control of my life, to break free from the shackles of Max's family and their constant torment. And with Carla by my side, I knew that I had the strength to do it. The tension in the household was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcia's disdain for me had only grown more palpable with Jenna's return, and even Hank, normally so passive, seemed to be emboldened by his daughter's cruelty. It all came to a head one evening when Max came to visit. I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that seeing me might rekindle some of the love and compassion that had once been the foundation of our marriage. But as soon as he stepped through the door, I could see the change in his eyes. Gone was the warmth and affection I had grown so accustomed to, replaced by a cold, detached stare that chilled me to the bone. "Abby," he said, his voice flat and emotionless, "we need to talk." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest, as I followed him into the living room, where Marcia, Hank, and Jenna were already waiting, their expressions ranging from smug satisfaction to outright glee. Max took a deep breath, and then the words I had been dreading tumbled out. "I'm leaving you, Abby. I can't do this anymore." The room seemed to spin around me, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. But Max pressed on, his voice growing colder with each word. "I need someone who can support me, not someone I have to take care of. This isn't the life I wanted." Marcia let out a triumphant cackle, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Finally, he's come to his senses," she crowed. "You were never good enough for him, Abby, just a useless burden." Jenna nodded in agreement, her lips twisted into a cruel smirk. "Good riddance," she spat. Maybe now Max can find a real woman, not some pathetic cripple. I opened my mouth to protest, to beg Max to reconsider, but the words died in my throat. What was the point? It was clear that his mind was made up, that he had been poisoned by the toxic influence of his family. Carla, bless her soul, tried to intervene, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you speak to her like that?" she snarled, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "Abby is 10 times the person any of you will ever be." But her words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the chorus of cruel laughter that echoed through the room. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The pain, the anguish, the endless torment, it all crystallized into a burning resolve, a determination to break free from this toxic cycle of abuse once and for all. I looked at Max, my heart hardening with each passing second. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "If that's how you really feel, then I'm leaving." Marcia's laughter died in her throat, her eyes widening in surprise. "What did you say?" she spluttered, her face flushing an ugly shade of red. But I was done cowering, done being the victim. "You heard me," I said, my voice ringing with newfound strength. "I'm leaving this poisonous environment, and I'm never coming back." Jenna opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a sharp glare. "Save it," I snapped. "I'm done listening to your pathetic attempts at tearing me down. I'm stronger than all of you combined, and it's time I started living my life on my own terms." With that, I turned and wheeled myself out of the room, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Carla fell into step beside me, her eyes shining with pride and admiration. "I've never been more proud of you, Abby," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're finally free." And as we left that toxic house behind, I knew that she was right. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. I was free, and nothing, not Max, not Marcia, not anyone, was ever going to hold me back again. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs as Carla and I pulled up to the lakeside cabin I had inherited from my parents. It was a rustic yet cozy retreat nestled among towering pines and overlooking a pristine body of water that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. As I wheeled myself onto the porch, taking in the breathtaking scenery, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying until that moment. "Welcome home, Abby," Carla said, her voice warm and filled with pride. "This is where you're meant to be." And she was right. From the moment we stepped inside, I knew that this place, this haven, was exactly what I needed to start my new life, to finally break free from the shackles of Max's toxic family and their endless cruelty. The cabin was a blank canvas, just waiting for me to make it my own. And with Carla's help, that's exactly what we did. We transformed the spacious living area into a stunning studio, with large windows that flooded the space with natural light and offered breathtaking views of the lake. Carla helped me set up my easels and organize my supplies, her keen eye for detail ensuring that every aspect of the space was perfectly tailored to my needs. "This is your domain, Abby," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "A place where you can create without limits, without anyone holding you back." And create I did. With each stroke of my brush, I poured my heart and soul onto the canvas, channeling the pain and anguish of my past into vibrant, emotive pieces that seemed to come alive before my very eyes. Carla was my constant companion, offering encouragement and support every step of the way. "Your talent is inspiring, Abby," she would say, her eyes filled with admiration. "The world needs to see it." And so, with her help, I began to build my portfolio, showcasing my work online and in local galleries. At first, the response was modest, but as word of my talent spread, the commissions began to pour in. Before long, I was able to support myself entirely through my art, a feat I had once thought impossible. But more than just financial independence, my success brought with it a sense of empowerment and validation that I had been sorely lacking in my life. No longer was I the useless burden that Max's family had so cruelly labeled me. I was a thriving artist, a woman in control of her own destiny, and nothing, not their cruelty, not their disdain, could ever take that away from me. As the months passed, I found myself growing stronger, more confident, and more sure of myself than I had ever been before. The peaceful surroundings of the cabin, coupled with Carla's unwavering support, had become a sanctuary, a place where I could heal, both physically and emotionally. And yet, even as I basked in my newfound freedom and success, a part of me couldn't help but wonder about the family I had left behind. What had become of Max and his toxic brood? Had they continued to wallow in their own bitterness and resentment, or had my departure forced them to confront the ugliness of their actions? I tried not to dwell on those thoughts, focusing instead on the present and the bright future that stretched out before me. But deep down, I knew that one day I would have to face them again, if not for my own sake, then for the sake of the countless others who had suffered at their hands. And when that day came, I vowed to be ready, my newfound strength and resilience a shield against their cruelty and a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt the sting of their malice. For now, though, I was content to simply revel in my newfound independence, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of Carla's friendship. This was my life now, and no one, not Max, not Marcia, not anyone, was ever going to take that away from me again. Life at the lakeside cabin was everything I had dreamed of and more. The peace and tranquility of the surroundings provided the perfect backdrop for my art, and with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident, and more in control of my own destiny. Carla was a constant source of support and encouragement, her unwavering belief in me fueling my determination to succeed. Together, we had created a haven, a place where I could thrive, free from the toxic influence of Max's family and their endless cruelty. But even as I basked in my newfound independence, the ghosts of my past refused to stay buried. It started with a phone call, the shrill ring shattering the peaceful silence of the cabin like a bolt of lightning. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my heart sink. It was Marcia, no doubt calling to unleash another torrent of abuse and vitriol. Without a second thought, I let it go to voicemail, refusing to let her poison seep back into my life. But the calls kept coming, day after day, week after week, each one more insistent than the last. And with each unanswered ring, I could feel the weight of my past growing heavier, threatening to drag me back into the darkness I had fought so hard to escape. Finally, one day, as the phone rang for what felt like the 100th time, something inside me snapped. With a trembling hand, I answered, bracing myself for the onslaught of hatred that was sure to follow. But the voice on the other end was not what I expected. "Abby?" Marcia's voice was strained, almost pleading. "Please, we need your help." I felt a surge of anger rise within me, but before I could respond, she continued. "Max, he's made a mess of everything. The business is failing. We're drowning in debt. And I'm sick, Abby, really sick." There was a pause, and for a moment I thought she had hung up. But then her voice came through again, barely above a whisper. "We were wrong, Abby. So wrong. Please, come back. We need you." The line went dead, and I was left staring at the phone, my mind racing with 1,000 different emotions. Part of me wanted to laugh, to revel in the sweet taste of revenge, to let them suffer as they had made me suffer for so long. But another part of me, the part that had once loved Max, that had seen the good in his family despite their flaws, couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. Carla must have sensed my turmoil, because she appeared at my side, her eyes filled with concern. "What is it, Abby?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath and told her everything, laying bare the raw emotions that Marcia's words had stirred within me. To her credit, Carla didn't judge or dismiss my feelings. Instead, she simply listened, offering a shoulder to lean on and a sympathetic ear. "You've come so far, Abby," she said when I had finished. "Don't let them drag you back into that darkness." Her words resonated deep within me, reminding me of the strength and resilience I had cultivated over these past few months. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman they had once known. I was a survivor, a fighter, and I wasn't about to let their toxic influence poison my newfound happiness. But even as I resolved to push them from my mind, a part of me couldn't help but wonder what had transpired to bring them to such a desperate state. Had Max's ambition finally caught up with him? Had Jenna's bitterness consumed her from within? And what of Marcia's cryptic confession? What illness could have possibly humbled her so? Against my better judgment, I found myself growing curious, a morbid fascination taking root in the depths of my mind. Perhaps it was time to face them one last time, to confront the demons of my past and lay them to rest once and for all. Perhaps in doing so, I could finally find the closure I had been seeking all along. With a newfound resolve, I turned to Carla, my eyes alight with determination. "Book me a flight," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "It's time I paid Max and his family a visit." The familiar streets of my hometown felt like a foreign land as Carla and I made our way to Max's family home. So much had changed since I had last been here. I had changed, grown stronger and more resilient in the face of their cruelty. As we pulled up to the house, a sense of trepidation washed over me. What would I find on the other side of that door? Had they truly hit rock bottom, or was this all just another twisted game, another attempt to tear me down? Carla must have sensed my hesitation because she reached over and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "You've got this, Abby," she said, her voice filled with unwavering confidence. "Remember who you are and what you've overcome." With a deep breath, I steeled my resolve and wheeled myself up to the front door. Before I could even knock, it swung open, revealing a sight that nearly took my breath away. Marcia stood before me, her once immaculate appearance, now disheveled and unkempt. Her eyes were sunken, her skin sallow, and she seemed to have aged a decade in the short time since I had last seen her. "Abby," she croaked, her voice little more than a raspy whisper. "You came." I nodded, struggling to keep my composure in the face of her haggard appearance. "I came," I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. She stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter, and as I wheeled myself into the familiar living room, I was struck by the state of disrepair that had befallen the once pristine home. Piles of unopened mail and overflowing ashtrays littered every surface, and the air was thick with the stale scent of despair. And then, there they were, Max, Jenna, and Hank, huddled together on the tattered sofa like a pack of wounded animals. They looked up as I entered, their eyes a mixture of shame and relief. "Abby," Max breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say." I held up a hand, silencing him before he could continue. "Save it," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound strength and confidence. "I'm not here for your apologies or your excuses. I'm here to set the record straight, once and for all." Jenna opened her mouth to protest, but one look from Carla was enough to silence her. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that the tables had well and truly turned. "For years you treated me like a burden, like I was nothing more than a useless cripple," I continued, my gaze sweeping over each of them in turn. "You mocked me, belittled me, and tried to break me down at every turn." Marcia flinched, her eyes downcast, but I pressed on, the words tumbling from my lips like a dam bursting. "But you failed. You failed because you underestimated my strength, my resilience, and my determination to rise above your cruelty." I gestured to the disheveled state of the room, the tangible evidence of their downfall. "Look around you. This is what happens when you let bitterness and resentment consume you. This is the price you pay for treating others with such callous disregard." Max opened his mouth, but I cut him off with a sharp shake of my head. "No, Max, it's my turn to speak now." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the final blow. "While you were busy tearing me down, I was building something for myself. A life, a career, a future, all things you said I could never have." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick portfolio, filled with samples of my work and glowing reviews from critics and collectors alike. "This is what you mocked me for," I said, tossing the portfolio onto the coffee table with a resounding thud. "This is the useless art that you said no one would ever want." Jenna's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, her mouth hanging open in a silent gasp of disbelief. "But you were wrong," I continued, my voice rising with each word. "You were all wrong about me, and now the world knows the truth, that I am a survivor, a fighter, and a force to be reckoned with." I wheeled myself closer until I was mere inches from where they sat, huddled together like frightened children. "You called me a burden, but look at you now, crumbling under your own weight. I'm stronger without you, stronger than I've ever been, and that's something you'll never be able to take away from me." With those final words, I turned and made my way towards the door, Carla beaming with pride at my side. As we stepped out into the crisp evening air, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the weight of their hatred, their cruelty, and their toxic influence. I was free, truly free, and nothing they could say or do would ever change that. In that moment, I knew that I had won, not just the battle but the war, and as we drove away, leaving their shattered lives behind, I couldn't help but smile. Revenge, it seemed, was indeed a dish best served cold.